What's going on YouTube? Welcome to the channel, Maplewood Reviews. First book review, The Selling of the President by Joe McGINNISS, published in 1968, Penguin Books. Alright? Many of us don't know the amount of work that goes through making a political campaign for securing the presidential election. This lecture and review won't be death by PowerPoint. If you don't know what that means, in other words, boring. It's going to be quick, straight to the point, and that's it. This lecture and review is created for educational purposes, hint, hint, homework answers, college exams. I had to read this book in college, school research, and it's easy to understand. All right, let's get started. In the first chapter of the book, which I think is the most important chapter of the book and is arguably very important to read out of all chapters, paints the reader a picture of behind the scenes for presidential candidates creating commercials for the whole American population to see in their living room. The book begins with Mike Stanislavski, who was responsible for designing a proper setting. As usual, a full bookcase, heavy brown desk, but with something new. A window. Wow, that is new. His design called for a window between the two bookcases behind the desk. It adds lightness, he said, not just physically, but psychological lightness. You see, us as voters, we don't really see this stuff. You know what I mean? This is how in-depth this book is going to tell you the selling of a presidential candidate. The green room, which is operated by Ray Vosgey, is the first room Nixon entered prior to his proper setting arrangement. Ray Vosgey was responsible for Nixon's makeup for the video shoots. In this chapter, we can also see cameramen and Nixon giving instructions and cues during all recordings and behind-the-scene comments not meant for the public. Nixon would delete tape recordings for multiple reasons, such as the speech was too long, stumbling his words, literally sirens of a police car outside of the video shoot, different tone, and he would also be attacking Hubert Humphrey's administration over multiple issues, such as the crime in Buffalo, New York, and the New York City teacher strike, which he privately says that it was all because of the Negro Puerto Rican groups as the main cause. Of course, he didn't mention that in the speech. If you asked why, it's because he needs the Negro and Puerto Rican votes to secure election. You can't forget about the minorities. It's not always about getting the white people's vote. The difference between the individual and his image is human nature. It is exaggerated and referred to as American nature. Politics, in a sense, has always been a con game. Politicians are famously known for lying to voters to get their vote to secure power, positioning, and wealth. Advertising is the biggest con game, whether it's automobiles or political candidates. In with the new, out with the old can be said here. With the coming of technologies such as social media today, television in 1968, old political values disappeared. Nixon would have won the 1960 election if it wasn't for TV that made him look lost, hungry, bitter, and confused. Jokingly, he also blamed his beard too. Do not forget that we sometimes measure these political candidates against an ideal, such as a god, king, pope, hero, father. It is all about perception on the outside, never on the inside. This is a mistake we make. The book adds that voters are basically lazy, basically uninterested in making an effort to understand what we're talking about. Reason requires a high degree of discipline, of concentration. Impression is easier. Reason pushes the viewer back. It assaults him. It demands that he agree or disagree. Impression can envelop him, invite him, without making an intellectual demand. Political candidates are celebrities. I want you guys to remember that. A great excerpt from the book tells us how George Bush's campaign budget went to advertising. 80% went to advertising. 59% of this went to television. Newspapers got 3%. After Richard Nixon received his new slogan, "This time vote like your whole world depended on it," the campaign team and manager decided this will run in the center spread of Life magazine and on billboards. If you haven't already learned by now, this is the selling of a presidential candidate. This is the main theme of the book and message the author is giving us. This is all about the operations and behind the scenes of a presidential candidate campaigning for election. Remember this, phrase to phrase, state to state. After securing his nomination, Nixon would go state to state covering all the problems of America in 1968 from phrase to phrase. He would give different responses. For example, a question in New England, which is very blue and Democrat, would be a different response given. In a state like Texas with the same question, which bleeds red and is Republican, would also get a different response. The reason he does this is to portray an image of the right candidate for their own country. Furthermore, when he would hold rallies at studios, this is very important, they would recruit local Republicans and enough African Americans to make sure it wasn't an all-white party. These Republicans would cheer and applaud for Nixon after every answer he gave to a reporter. Public image is very important. Feedback is also very important. We already know that public image is important when it comes to selling a president to America. The man behind the whole operations was Frank Shakespeare, and he was responsible for making sure Richard Nixon becomes President of the United States. There has been other people who are responsible for watching the tapes of the programs Richard Nixon was in and would be given feedback to correct his public image just in time he becomes president. Feedback would include moving his arm too much, whiter makeup on upper eyelids, all studio doors closed, keep him in the sun to maintain a constant level of healthy tan, and so much more. This is the first step of the memorandum, which is known as the look, according to the book. The second step of the memorandum is questions and answers. This generally helps Richard Nixon prepare so he doesn't get surprised by a question and already has the responses to all the questions. Gee, that's cheating. They're allowed on the show. The third step of the memorandum is staging, where they would stage more women, party size limits, microphone cords, VIPs, families, and much more. The last step of the memorandum is basically the general, not the general of the United States Army. General includes introductions, applause, music, rehearsals, and other changes by the director that day. Basically just background stuff. All right. The best part, wrap up and review. To sum up what we've learned in the book of The Selling of the President by Joe McGINNISS. Now remember, this book has 14 chapters, roughly around 160 pages, not much text. It's a very quick read. You could read it in a day or two. You know, it's an easy read. All right, but I'm just telling you so you don't have to read it. All right, so to sum up, what we have learned in the book of The Selling of the President by Joe McGINNISS is that it gives the reader a glimpse of how a presidential candidate prepares for nomination and election when campaigning. Image is what counts. TV presentations deliver the product, which is the image of the candidate. Campaign managers, such as Frank Shakespeare, casted an image of Nixon and sold America a president. The power of manipulating television by cameramen and speechwriters adjusted Nixon's image is a classic account of selling a president. How can we relate to today's world? Comment down below how you could relate this book from being published in 1968 to the 2024 presidential elections. I'll give you a response. What are the pros and cons of entering the presidential campaigns today? And also, comment down below the big 3 presidential candidates, if you know who they are, and who you think is going to win the 2024 presidential election. Like, comment, subscribe, share. Thank you.